I want you to just imagine a scenario for a second.
Mhm.
You are sitting at your desk going through the, routine monthly expenses for your company's software.
Right, just the usual end of the month stuff.
Exactly. The usual numbers, maybe a slight increase here or there because, I don't know, you hired somebody new.
Sure.
So you open up the invoice for your team's artificial intelligence usage, and right there, at the very bottom line, it says your company owes $500 million
Oh my
for a
God.
single month
Ah,
of AI usage.
I mean, that is just, it's the kind of staggering figure that would make a seasoned CFO's heart literally stop beating.
$500 million in 30 days. And the wild thing is that is not a hypothetical. That is exactly what happened to an unnamed enterprise recently.
Yeah, that's just bonker.
It really is.
Yeah.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into just a phenomenal piece of reporting
Right.
from the June 11th, 2026 issue of Tech Reader magazine.
Yeah, Aaron Rose's piece.
All right, it's an article by Aaron Rose titled "The Meter is Running."
Right.
And the mission for our deep dive today is to really understand this massive sort of silent shift happening all around us right now.
It's huge.
It is. The wild, experimental, introductory era of AI. It is officially over.
Mm.
And the era of strict, unforgiving market pricing has aggressively begun.
Yeah, and we really need to set the stage here because, when people hear about a $500 million software bill,
Which is just, yeah.
right, or developers suddenly losing access to their favorite tools, the immediate instinct is just to panic. People assume the AI bubble is bursting.
Or that the tech itself is failing, right?
Exactly. But this isn't a technological crisis at all. It is a financial wake-up call.
No?
For the last few years, these AI tools have felt like, well, boundless, infinite magic. You type a prompt into a box and you get an essay or a fully functional block of code.
Like it's pulled right out of thin air.
Right. But there is a massive amount of physical computing power required to actually generate that magic. And finally, after years of these companies just subsidizing it, that true compute cost is getting a very real price tag attached to it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I read that Axios report about the $500 million Claude bill, and it genuinely stressed me out.
I bet.
If my department blew a $500 million hole in the budget, I'd be packing up my desk before lunch.
Oh, absolutely.
But before we get to how a bill gets that high, we really have to look at the immediate culture shock happening right now among developers.
Huh.
And enterprises, too.
Yeah, the people basically having their limitless access completely revoked overnight.
Exactly. Let's look at what happened with GitHub on June 1st. They made this massive change to GitHub Copilot.
Which is everywhere.
Right. It's the AI coding assistant used by essentially the entire software industry. Now, the base subscription price of $10 a month, that stayed the same.
Yep.
But here's the catch. That $10 now simply buys you $10 in what they're calling AI credits, with 1 credit equaling 1 cent.
Right. They transition their heavy-duty tasks strictly over to token-based billing.
Wait, before we go further on that, when GitHub says you pay per token, what exactly is the meter measuring there?
That's a great question.
Are we paying per word? Or like per line of code? Or is it per millisecond of the computer thinking?
That is a crucial distinction. A token is essentially the fundamental unit of data an AI model reads and generates.
Okay.
You can think of it kind of like a syllable or a chunk of a word. A standard English word is usually about 1.5 tokens.
Got it.
So every single time you send a prompt to the AI and every single time it generates an answer back, the system counts those chunks of data.
Like a taximeter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the act of the AI generating that response is called inference. So when you are paying for tokens, you are paying for the raw computational energy required to run inference on those specific syllables.
So every time the AI thinks, the meter spins.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now, basic code completion, like when you were just typing and the AI guesses the rest of your line.
Yeah, the autocomplete stuff.
Right. That is still unlimited under the $10 plan. But anything complex, what they call agentic workflows, that moved entirely to the meter.
I've heard that term agentic thrown around a lot lately. How is that mechanically different from just autocomplete?
Well, let's look at the compute effort. Autocomplete is like asking someone to just guess the last word of your sentence.
Okay, pretty easy.
Right. It requires very little mental energy. An agentic workflow, though, is when the AI is acting as an independent agent performing multi-step tasks.
Like what?
Like it is reading thousands of lines of your code base, making architectural decisions, writing new code, testing it for errors, and then iterating on its own mistakes.
Wow.
To use an analogy, it's like asking someone to read a 500-page book, write a sequel, and then proofread it. The mental calories required aren't just double, they're exponential.
Which totally explains the immediate developer backlash. Because users were jumping into forums on June 1st, reporting that they had burned through their entire monthly allotment of credits in a matter of hours.
Yeah, it was chaotic.
Some people watched their entire month's budget literally vanish on day one just by spinning up a complex AI agent workflow.
Yep.
They treated it like autocomplete, but the system was doing the heavy lifting of like a senior engineer.
Which is an entirely predictable disaster, honestly. When you transition a user base from a flat rate to consumption-based pricing without retraining their behavior, that's what happens.
Yeah.
They were used to an all-you-can-eat buffet where they paid at the door. Suddenly, management is charging by the calorie, and developers are still ordering, 5-tier wedding cakes.
That buffet dynamic is exactly what led to that staggering $500 million bill.
Yeah.
I mean, how does the math even compound to $500 million in 30 days?
It happens through an astonishing lack of internal guardrails.
Really? Just no limits?
None. The enterprise in question gave their entire workforce access to a highly capable premium AI model. But they implemented 0 usage caps on the employee licenses.
Oh, no.
So the cost of every single token generated by every single employee just accumulated in the background without a single checkpoint until someone in accounting finally looked at the dashboard at the end of the month.
And it wasn't an isolated incident either. Axios reported another major tech company burned through its entire AI budget for the whole year of 2026 by April.
Yes.
A 12-month budget evaporated in roughly 90 days.
And what's fascinating here is how this introduces a somewhat perverse cultural phenomenon that emerged within these enterprise engineering circles.
Okay.
There is an actual term for it now, token maxing.
Token maxing. That sounds like an extreme sport for nerds.
Well, in corporate environments, it basically became one. Organizations were actually treating raw AI token usage as a proxy for employee productivity.
Wait, really?
Yes. They set up internal leaderboards. If an engineer was consuming massive amounts of tokens, the managerial assumption was that the engineer must be getting a massive amount of work done.
That is wow.
Right. They inadvertently gamified the consumption of the most expensive computing resource on the planet. Engineers are incentivized to run bloated, verbose queries just to pump up their token metrics.
Okay, I have to push back here, though. These tech giants are filled with the smartest financial minds and data scientists in the world.
Sure.
How does a major tech company deploy technology this expensive without building a safety net?
Because the initial thrill of the capability completely blinded the finance department.
Just got swept up in it.
Exactly. The sheer power of these tools was so revolutionary that companies rushed to deploy them everywhere. They operated on the assumption that they would, figure out the unit economics later.
The classic Silicon Valley move.
Right. Deploy first, capture market share, and ask questions later.
And now the honeymoon phase is over, and the bill has arrived on the CFO's desk.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, here is the crucial context that makes this so interesting.
What's that?
That sudden panic when the massive invoice prints. The scramble to audit software usage. This is actually not a new phenomenon.
Really?
No, this exact panic has happened multiple times in technology history. It is a very well-documented cycle of compute scarcity versus abundance.
Let's trace that back. Where did this cycle start?
Think back to the early days of business computing. We had mainframes.
Right. Big reams full of machines.
Exactly. Access to a mainframe was highly rationed because machine time was incredibly expensive. You had to schedule your time, account for it to the minute, and carefully allocate every second of processing power.
Wow.
Programmers actually wrote and tested their logic by hand on physical paper because the cost of running code interactively to find a bug was simply too high.
I can't even imagine an engineer today writing code on paper.
It seems completely archaic now, but then came the personal computer, which completely flipped the paradigm.
Right, because everyone had one.
Yeah, compute time became physically abundant. You didn't have to schedule the PC. It just sat on your desk. You turned it on and worked. There was no meter running.
I see.
But then the industry transitioned to cloud computing. Do you remember the early pitch for moving everything to the cloud?
Oh, absolutely. It was like, get rid of your server rooms,
Yeah.
pay only for what you use, it's incredibly cheap, and there are no hardware maintenance costs.
Exactly. And at first, those cloud bills were startlingly low compared to maintaining physical servers, so adoption accelerated wildly.
But then you get locked in.
Precisely. The cloud architecture is designed to lock you in. You start using their specific APIs, their microservices, their storage. And as companies built massive applications entirely around these cloud-native assumptions, that cheap infrastructure suddenly scaled up into a massive, unavoidable line item.
The meter was running the whole time.
The meter was always running in the cloud. It just took time for organizations to scale their operations enough to notice how fast the dials were spinning.
So early pricing in any new tech cycle just reflects the pilot scale.
Yes. AI is simply the latest iteration of this exact historical cycle. For the last 3 years, the API costs and flat-rate subscriptions were heavily subsidized.
By venture capital and stuff.
Right. Venture capital and big tech war chests absorbed the massive losses to build user habits and capture market share. But now, entire corporate workflows and consumer products are built around AI.
And the money is running out.
The subsidies are drying up, yeah. And the real, unvarnished costs of compute are becoming visible. The AI market in 2026 has hit the exact same inflection point that cloud computing hit a decade ago.
Which makes total sense. And if you are listening to this right now and you've noticed that your company's IT department is suddenly, auditing your software licenses.
Oh yeah, they definitely are.
Or maybe they've mysteriously restricted which AI tools you are allowed to use for your daily tasks. This historical cycle is exactly why.
It's all connected.
You aren't being punished. The finance department just finally realized the meter is running, and they are absolutely terrified of being the next headline.
They are frantically trying to regain control of the budget.
Which leads us to the next massive shift in the article. With all these companies suddenly terrified of blowing their budgets, there's a desperate need for cheaper alternatives.
Naturally.
People still need the AI to do their jobs, but they simply cannot afford the premium frontier price tag for every little task.
Yep.
And that desperation creates a massive vacuum for budget-friendly technology.
And as they say, nature abhors a vacuum.
Seriously. This reminds me of the home video market format wars in the 1980s.
Oh, Betamax and VHS.
Exactly. You had Betamax, which offered genuinely superior capability. It had better picture resolution, better sound. But the players were really expensive to make and expensive for consumers to buy.
Right.
And then you had VHS, which was a technically inferior product. But VHS won the war.
Because it was cheaper.
Yes. Not because it was better, but because the budget math worked out for the average consumer. They wanted lower hardware prices and wider availability.
It is a recurring story. The lesson isn't that consumers or businesses don't care about quality. It is that price itself is a feature.
Wow. Price is a feature.
And often, it is the decisive feature that dictates market dominance.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the data from our source shows this dynamic playing out in AI right now at absolute breakneck speed.
The OpenRitter numbers.
Yes, let's look at the numbers from OpenRitter. For context, OpenRitter is essentially an API switchboard. It's a platform that routes developer traffic to over 400 different AI models.
Right.
Developers use it so they can easily swap between different models depending on their needs. And because OpenRitter sits right in the middle, they have incredible visibility into what developers are actually choosing to use on a daily basis.
They have a god's eye view of raw market demand.
And here's the most striking data point of this entire deep dive. In late 2024, Chinese AI models accounted for under 2% of the traffic on OpenRitter.
Just a tiny blip.
Under 2%. But by the week of February 24, 2026, those models accounted for 61% of token consumption among the platform's 10 most used models.
Wow.
And by April, they had settled at 46% of all tokens processed on the entire platform. Yeah. They went from under 2% to capturing nearly half the market in just over a year.
That is just a staggering migration. And we have to ask why developers are flocking to these specific models.
Are they just better?
No. Because if you look at standard intelligence evaluations, the benchmark tests that measure reasoning, coding ability, general knowledge, the highest volume models in this Chinese cohort actually rank well outside the top 10.
Really?
Yeah, developers are absolutely not choosing them because they are the most capable.
So we are seeing a massive enterprise migration to technically inferior products. It has to be entirely about the cost.
It is about a massive disparity in pricing. The input pricing for some of these Tier 3 models runs at a fraction of a cent per million tokens.
A fraction of a cent.
Yes. Compare that to several dollars per million tokens for the Western frontier models. We aren't talking about a 10% discount to sway a buyer here. We are talking about an entirely different universe of pricing.
But help me understand the mechanics of that. How can one model cost several dollars per million tokens and another cost a fraction of a cent? Are they just, subsidizing it to gain market share, or is there an actual structural difference?
There is a profound structural difference.
Okay.
The most expensive frontier models are massive, lumbering giants. They might have over 1 trillion parameters, which are essentially the artificial synapses of the network.
That sounds huge.
It is. Running inference on a 1 trillion parameter model requires an immense amount of electricity and highly specialized silicon.
Right.
The cheaper models, though, are highly optimized. They might only have 7 or 8 billion parameters.
So much smaller.
Much smaller. And they use architectural tricks, like something called mixture of experts, where only a tiny portion of the brain actually activates for any given prompt. They are just smaller, leaner, more efficient engines.
But if you are a major enterprise handling sensitive data, are you really going to route your workflows through a cheap offshore model just to save a fraction of a cent? Doesn't that introduce massive security and privacy risks?
That is the exact risk calculation enterprise security teams are running right now.
I would hope so.
And the solution they are landing on is intelligent routing.
What's that?
You do not send your proprietary source code or your customer's financial data to the cheap model. You send that to the expensive, highly secure, enterprise-grade frontier model.
Okay, that makes sense.
But you use the cheap models for the massive volume of mundane, low-risk tasks.
Like what?
Well, if you just need to format 1 million lines of public server logs or translate a standard user manual into French, you do not need the absolute smartest intelligence on the planet.
Right, you don't need a genius to format a spreadsheet.
Exactly. A cheap model is good enough. And as the data shows, in mature markets, good enough tends to win the bulk of the volume.
Because if routing your mundane tasks through a good enough model saves your company from a $500 million bill, your CFO is going to mandate good enough every single time.
The budget math is incredibly straightforward, and it is honestly forcing the hand of the major players.
Well, if these budget models are eating up nearly half the market share just by being cheap, the Western giants can't just sit there and watch their volume vanish.
No, they can't.
They have to stop the bleeding. Is that why we suddenly saw Google completely gut their subscription pricing this month?
It is really the only logical explanation for their timing.
Let's look at the numbers on Google's price slash. On June 8th, Google dropped the entry price for its AI subscription from $7.99 down to $4.99.
That's a huge drop.
That is a nearly 40% price cut. And not only that, they doubled the included cloud storage from 200 gigabytes to 400 gigabytes.
Right.
They also dropped their top consumer tier from $250 down to $200.
Look, you do not slash your entry pricing by 40% only 4 months after a launch unless the market is heavily pushing back.
Yeah, that smells like panic.
Consumers and small businesses were looking at the landscape and deciding the premium just wasn't worth it.
But subscription cuts aren't the only way developers are dodging these massive API bills. The article highlights a whole movement toward local models like Google's Gemma family.
Yes, the open weight models.
Right, the piece refers to them as open weight models. What does open weight actually mean compared to the open source software we're all used to?
Well, open source software means the developer shares the human readable code, so anyone can see exactly how the program is written. Open weight is different. With AI, the value isn't really just the code. It's the millions of hours of training that formed the neural pathways.
The brain itself.
Exactly. The weights are the mathematical connections between those pathways. So an open weight model means the creator is letting you download the fully trained brain. You can put it right on your own laptop or your company's internal servers.
So you completely bypass the API meter. You just own the brain.
You bypass the API meter, but here there is a significant hardware catch.
Oh, of course.
To run a highly capable open weight model locally, you need massive amounts of RAM and incredibly powerful GPUs. So an enterprise is essentially trading a recurring, terrifying API rental bill for an upfront hardware mortgage.
A hardware mortgage. I like that.
But once you buy the hardware, you can run the model all day and night, and inference doesn't cost you a single token.
So what does this all mean? If I'm looking at this maturing landscape, it seems like we're really splitting into extremes.
We are.
At the very top, you have Tier 1, the frontier models. These are the trillion parameter geniuses. You pay a massive premium, but you use them when you are trying to, I don't know, cure a disease, or analyze highly sensitive financial data, places where the cost is undeniably justified by the output.
Right, that is the institutional tier.
And at the absolute bottom, you have Tier 3, the cost-optimized tier. This is the ultra-cheap API providers and the local open-weight models. It's just an absolute sponge absorbing every single mundane, low-risk workload that doesn't require top-tier intelligence.
Yep.
So where does that leave the middle?
That leaves Tier 2, the mid-market subscriptions. This is the space Google and others are desperately repricing to defend right now.
The $4.99 plans.
Exactly. It is designed for everyday consumers, freelancers, and small businesses who need reliable, capable AI without the headache of managing local hardware, but who absolutely refuse to pay enterprise API prices.
So we have gone from a world of unlimited magical abundance to strict budgets, tier systems, hardware mortgages, and token anxiety.
Which means we can all finally take a deep breath.
Really?
Yeah, because this isn't a crisis of the technology failing. Remember our history lesson. Mainframes did not die when personal computers arrived. They just found their specific high-value tier in banking and aviation.
Right.
The cloud didn't destroy on-premise servers. A hybrid balance was struck. AI has simply left its wild, exploratory phase. The era where pricing was promotional and corporate budgets were ungoverned is just over.
It's growing up.
Yes, AI has become an ordinary software market, governed by ordinary market logic. Cost controls, workload optimization, and a strict demand for return on investment.
The Wild West is over, and the accountants have officially arrived in town.
They always do.
They really do. Well, it has been an incredible journey today. We started with the sheer panic of an unnamed enterprise opening a $500 million card bill, and developers watching their GitHub Copilot credits just vanish into thin air.
A rude awakening.
Truly. We unpack the mechanics of token billing and how agentic workflows demand exponential compute. We traced how that financial shockwave created a desperation for cheaper alternatives, which led to Chinese models capturing nearly half the token traffic on OpenRouter simply by offering an optimized architecture at a fraction of a cent.
The power of good enough.
And finally, we saw how that pressure forced giants like Google to slash their subscription prices, settling the entire AI landscape into a predictable, tiered market.
You know, this maturation raises an important question, though, and it's something I want everyone listening to really ponder.
Okay, what's that?
For the last few years, the entire tech industry has been absolutely obsessed with the raw capability of AI. We have been asking, will it become smarter than humans? When will it achieve superintelligence?
Right, the sci-fi questions.
But look at what we've uncovered today. Look at how aggressively the market is shifting toward cheaper, noticeably less capable models simply to save a few cents on the dollar.
Because good enough wins the volume.
Exactly. So, given that economic reality, here is the thought I will leave you with. Will the AI of the future actually be driven by the grand philosophical pursuit of superintelligence? Or will it simply be driven by the relentless corporate pursuit of the lowest possible server cost?
Wow, that completely flips the narrative on its head. Are we building a digital god, or are we just trying to build a really cheap calculator?
It's a real question.
That is a fantastic thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. And as you go back to your day, whether you're coding, writing, or just managing a budget, keep questioning the tech you use every day. Think about who is paying for it, and remember, the meter is always running. We'll catch you next time.